Hello everybody, it's Kara from Wild Book Garden, and today I'm here with part 1 of my August wrap-up. Before I get into that, just a couple of, little updates. I did talk about this on my community tab, but just in case you didn't hear, I wanted to, kind of apologize or explain for why my August wrap-ups are going to be even later than usual. There were a couple of reasons for that. Scheduling things came up with work and other stuff, but also here in California, like several other places, we're in the middle of a really bad heat wave. We actually have been under a heat advisory for the last week or so. We're just kind of coming out of it in the last few days, and that's on top of, just general weather and drought and all of that. So anyway, that, all those things together meant that I really wasn't able to film. I also don't have air conditioning. I do have fans. I feel very lucky that I'm not getting the 115-degree heat that some people are dealing with. That's Fahrenheit, by the way. And I know this is not a big deal. I just wanted to mention why I was going to be late. But things are cooling down a little bit. I hope that, I know there's a lot of extreme weather things going on, so I hope that you guys are taking care of yourselves as much as possible. As always, I put links about a few things going on in the world. I encourage you to share and donate if you are able, to help people in Pakistan because of the catastrophic flooding. A third of the country is underwater and it's absolutely devastating. Also, Jackson, Mississippi is completely without clean water. So there's a lot of things, if you are inclined, if you are able, please consider sharing and donating. All of that is in the description box. Also, I don't know if anyone is interested, but these earrings are from Plato's Fire. Not sponsored or anything, I just really love them. Okay, so finally into the actual video. As always, content warnings and links are going to be in the description box, and let's get started. So the first book that I finished in August is The Beautiful Ones by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This was a buddy read with my friend Mariana from Mariana Mas Books. And this was a birthday present from my friend Yvette from Book Cave. And as I said on Twitter at one point, everybody who told me I would love this book is 100% correct. I'm a little bit obsessed with this book. I might do a whole review on it because I loved it so much. I see why it doesn't work for everybody. This is a good example, I think, of Silvia Moreno Garcia's books being a very particular taste or kind of story and writing. By the way, I hope the wind chime noise isn't too annoying. If it is, I always have captions on my videos, but I have my windows open because, again, it's still very warm here. So this book is about, we're following 3 different main characters as our perspective characters, although we do get a little bit of some other characters as well. One of them is Nina, who is in the beautiful city of Loisel, and it's just in time for the grand season to begin, which is kind of the season in Regency England, and she is expected to be beautiful and charming and make a good match and everything, but that's not what Nina is interested in. And then on top of that, on top of being kind of uninterested and untalented at making a good impression on people, she also has some telekinetic abilities, because this is a historical fantasy, very light on the fantasy elements, but she does have that ability, which makes her even more of an outcast. Then one of our other main characters is Hector Alvray, and he is an entertainer, and he has this kind of tumultuous past. He has managed to raise himself up from poverty, and he and our third main character, who is Nina's cousin Valerie, her and Hector have a history together, and we find out more about that throughout the book. Hector begins courting Nina for his own purposes, but then, of course, things get much more complicated when people's feelings get involved. There's a lot of yearning in this book. Yeah, I really, really love this book. Again, I see why not everyone does, but I really, really felt for our main characters. I loved Nina and Hector so much, and even Valerie, she can be a horrible person and very frustrating, but I feel she's so well written. That's one of the things that I always find with this author's books, is that even the characters that are unlikable or unpleasant, I don't hate following them, I still find her interesting and compelling and well written. And I personally feel the character development for all of our characters, including some side characters, I think it felt believable. I can see why other people wouldn't, but I thought it was done well. I really loved Hector and Nina's dynamic, like I said, the yearning, some of their scenes together, just the slow build of relationships and the way those change. It was just beautifully done. I liked the sprinkle of magic here. I think that this book would be a really fantastic one for people who aren't fantasy readers and who are a little intimidated, because this is not too heavy on the historical or the fantasy parts. I always love Silvia Moreno Garcia's writing style. I just feel it's very clear and smooth. I love the way that she creates setting and atmosphere without over describing anything. That's something I find very impressive. And one other thing I'll mention is I feel the tone of this book is very heightened and intense. not like dramatic in a bad way, but like I said, just very heightened. And I think that is deliberate, and I think that is well done, but I think that's another thing that might not work for people. But anyway, I love this book. I gave The Beautiful Ones 5 stars, and yeah, I might be planning to do a video on this. Next, I finished a picture book, and that is At the Mountain's Base by Tracy Sorrell, illustrated by Wishoyot Alvitre, or Alvitre. And this is, let me show you an example of the art. I really like the style. This is not the kind of style I often gravitate to in picture books, but it really, really suits this book. And because it's so short, I don't want to get into too much detail, but this is basically a story that deals with family, and like missing people and loyalty to each other and to home and everything like that. Yeah, I don't want to give too much away, but I thought this was very well done, and I gave At the Mountain's Base 4 stars. And this is by a Native author, by the way, and it centers Native American characters. I feel like this line on the back is a good kind of, I don't know, it kind of summarizes the book. The roots that ground us help us soar. Next, I finished To Capture His Heart by Nancy Campbell Allen. This is the second book in a series of proper romance mysteries, and this is an ARC. I received this copy in exchange for an honest review, so thank you so much. I will link that review down below. I reviewed this and one other book, and this is the companion sequel to The Matchmaker's Lonely Heart, which I really enjoyed when I read it, and I really enjoyed this one as well. We are following Eva and Nathan. Eva is the cousin of the heroine from the first book, and Nathan is a friend of the hero from the first book. And the two of them already know each other because of some things that happen in the first book. Eva sort of ends up becoming the semi-official photographer for the police bureau, or the police station, because that is her profession. She's a photographer. She normally does people's portraits and things, but she now is also a crime scene photographer, and she is really good at this. She loves her job. And like I said, the two of them already know each other, and actually from pretty early on in this book, the reader knows that each of them already is romantically interested in the other person, but they don't know that that feeling is reciprocated. So when Nathan asks Eva to go with him as his date to his mother's extended stay house party in order to fend off matchmakers, Eva agrees, even though she's like, wow, this will be really not fun to pretend that I love him when I actually do love him. But she agrees, and they go to the party together, and of course they end up spending a lot more time together, and they also come across a mystery that takes place at this house, so they end up working on that. And yeah, like I'll link my review, like I said, if you want more info, but I really enjoyed this one. I wasn't sure if I would like the romance as much because the characters liking each other from the beginning is not usually something I find as compelling in a story, but I think it was done really well. And even though I would say I prefer the romance in the first book, there were parts of this second book that I think were done better than in the first one. So I feel like it kind of balances out. I enjoyed the characters, I liked the romance and the mystery. Again, check out my review, but I gave To Capture His Heart 4.5 stars. Next, I finished The Truth About Alice by Jennifer Matthew. This is a very, very short contemporary novel. I think it's only like 200 pages or something. And it is partly inspired by a real story, and it's really interesting because for the most part we follow 4 different main characters who are all like a lot of the story is centered around this character named Alice, who's not actually one of the main point of view characters, and she's really a social outcast in this high school. There's all these rumors about, you know, what a slut she is, and like nobody wants to spend time with her anymore. She's really like a social pariah at the school. And one of the big things that happens near the beginning of this book is that the kind of star of the football team is in a fatal car crash, and Alice is blamed for that because of this series of circumstances. And so the book deals with the fallout from that. That is kind of the thing that makes her an outcast and makes nobody want to spend time with her. And then we see things gradually start to change. We learn more about these different kids who go to this school and how they feel about Alice, just more about them in general, how they fit into this high school, I don't know, climate almost. And this was a really well executed book, but I totally understand why a lot of people don't like it. Like I said, we follow 4 main perspectives, and all but one of them are really horrible, unpleasant people. Like, they're not fun to follow. But I think they were really well written and really well evoked, and I think that this book is a very compelling look and a very well thought out look at the nastiness that can happen in communities in general. In this case, it is high school specifically, and the way that kids and people can treat each other. This book deals with a lot of heavy topics, so please check content warnings if you would like those. Again, those are in the description. I also listened to this on audio while I was reading along, and I really thought the narrators were fantastic. Let me pull up their names: Saskia Marveld, Graham Halstead, Ali Ahn, Michael Backinson, and Elizabeth Morton. Not only were their performances good, not only were they all very distinct, but I think they all did a really brilliant job of actually sounding like high schoolers. Like, I don't know how old the voice actors are, but to me they actually sounded pretty believable as teenagers. And I also think the ending of this book was pretty satisfying. I liked the way things came together. I liked kind of the note this book ended on. I think it did a good job of balancing the heaviness with some hope. I found the story very interesting and compelling, and I think it's interesting that this is a book that is told through a lot of these different characters' perspectives, and none of them really have, or most of them don't really have, all of the information about what happened, and that could be very frustrating, but it wasn't here. And like I was saying, I think the writing of this book was really well done. Like, the voice of these characters was really strong. So anyway, this is a very interesting book. I don't hear a lot about it. I see why a lot of people wouldn't like it, but I think because I was listening to the audio, that helped me get through it very quickly, which made it less draining to be in the heads of these very unpleasant characters. But yeah, I really liked this, and I gave The Truth About Alice 4 stars. Next, I finished A Skinful of Shadows by Frances Harding. This was a reread for me, and this was of course part of mine and Hannah's Frances Harding read along. I will link that live show down below. This is one of Frances Harding's most historical books. She does fantasy and historical fantasy, and this one is definitely in the historical fantasy category. Specifically, what year is this set in? I can't find it, but it's during the English Civil War. And Hannah has talked about several times in our live shows, reading interviews where Frances Harding talks about liking to set books at times of great change, and I think this book is definitely a good example of that. We're following our main character, Makepeace, who is a Puritan, and she has grown up in this small community with her mother, and Makepeace ends up learning that she has a special gift. There are people in the world who they are able to be, they have room to have other spirits inside of them. They're able to be inhabited by these different spirits, but that is very dangerous. And so Makepeace's mother trains her to resist them. But then one day something terrible happens. Makepeace lets down her guard, and she does end up with an extra spirit inside of her. And that is a spirit named Bear. Makepeace ends up being sent to some extended family. Once she's there, she does start making friends with some people, but she starts learning more about what her family is doing, why they're all here, what these abilities mean. And once she starts learning what is actually going on here, she wants to escape. And all of this is set against the backdrop of the English Civil War, all of this unrest and change. And the reason I led the discussion for this one is because it was my least favorite Frances Harding book, and it's interesting because I gave it the same rating, but it is no longer my least favorite. I enjoyed this more than I remembered. I was more impressed with it than I remembered. It's still not one of my favorite books by this author because the premise it doesn't specifically intrigue me. It's not as much my thing as some of her others, but it was really well done. I love Makepeace. I always love Frances Harding's main characters. I really liked the writing style. I think this is one of her less whimsical books, so if that's something that's been putting you off, this might be one you're interested in. I thought the historical aspects were done really well. I thought the atmosphere, the creepiness, was done really well. I thought the plot was engaging. I was really impressed with the characterization of the side characters. That's something I pretty much always feel she does a really good job with, and there were some in particular that I thought were really interesting, really compelling. Some you love and some you don't love, but I just think they were very well written. I also really liked the themes and the topics here, and the nuance here, about family and class and religion and war and these times of, again, times of change. And I thought this was really well done. Like I said, I enjoyed it more than I remembered, or I guess you should say, rereading it, I think I was more impressed with it. And I gave A Skinful of Shadows 4.5 stars. Next, I finished The Book of Cold Cases by Simone St. James. I'm not a Book of the Month member. I got this from a used bookstore, actually. This was my first novel by this author. I know that she tends to do dual timeline stories that are mysteries and that have a supernatural element, and I've been meaning to try her for a while. And I did not love this book, but I am still planning and excited to read some other things by this author. I've heard that this is not really representative of her best work. So we are following, in the present day timeline, we are following a young woman named Shay, and because of some things in her past, she is really interested and fixated on true crime. And one of the cases that she is especially interested in is one that famously took place in her small Oregon town, known as the Lady Killer murders, which were a series of murders committed by a female serial killer who was never caught, but everyone, or like everybody, believes that it was this woman, Beth Greer, but she was acquitted, and she now lives isolated at her mansion, her family mansion, even though a lot of people in the town believe, like, have always believed that she did do it and that she just got away with it. So that's like our present day timeline is Shay ends up getting Beth to agree to an interview to like get the real story of what happened, because she does this for like a true crime blog that she runs, and then the past timeline is from Beth's perspective, or following Beth, and it's about like what actually happened with these cases and these murders. And initially I was really enjoying this book. Like the first half, I would say I was really liking. I found the writing very compelling and smooth to read. I liked the focus on characterization in this book as opposed to plot at the expense of characters, because I think that's one reason why I'm very picky about mystery thrillers, or why I don't read a lot of them, is because I'm a character person, and I feel like there was more of an emphasis on the characters here. I was also very invested in both timelines, which almost never happens for me, so that was great. I also did like some of the thematic issues this book looks at, especially like gender and like women who commit crimes and everything, like just gender in general. I found the way this book talked about that interesting. But then at the halfway mark, we have like a big reveal about like who the killer is, and I had some issues with that. For one thing, I just can't get over the fact that this book unironically used this plot twist in the year 2022. Like, I just think from a storytelling perspective, that was ridiculous to me. But then also, I saw other reviewers, I know Bethany talked about this in her review, I will link that as well. Like, the implications of that are really bad, and that seems out of character for this author in like compared to like other books that she's done. So I was thinking mainly from like a storytelling perspective, but the more I think about like the implications of this, the more upset that part makes me as well. And then another thing that I really hated is at the ending, the way that some characters treat something that one of the characters does as being basically on the same level as the serial killer, I just could not get on board with. Like, that was the impression I got, is that we were supposed to view this person as equally bad, and this crime as like equal to the serial killings, and I just really didn't like that. I think there could have been a nuanced discussion of what justifies, you know, hurting or killing someone, but that's not what we got, in my opinion, so I really didn't like that. I also feel like some like plot threads were dropped, some things, like I feel like the way this book ended was very weird. I wasn't satisfied with this. Initially I gave it like 3 or 3.5 stars, but I ended up dropping it down to 2.5 stars because, again, like the more I think about this book, the more issues I had with it, and personally I wouldn't recommend this one. I've heard that Simone St. James's other books are really a lot better, so I'm still gonna read other things by her, but did not have a great time with this one. Next, I finished another Silvia Moreno Garcia book that I loved, and that was The Daughter of Dr Moreau by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This was a buddy read with my wonderful friend Yvette from Book Cave. This was our traditional SMG buddy read of the year. And this is a retelling, a reimagining of The Island of Dr Moreau. I have not read the original, I just knew the very basic premise of an island, animal and human hybrids, and experimentation, and really that's all you need to know, I feel like. I don't think that it's necessary to read that original to understand and enjoy this book, because I didn't, but I still really liked this. And this is set in the Yucatan Peninsula. We are following 2 perspective characters. One of them is Carlotta, and she is the daughter of Dr. Moreau, and she has grown up like helping her father with taking care of the animal hybrids. When she's a young girl, a young man ends up being hired as one of their new like caretakers basically for the estate, and his name is Montgomery, I believe. Yeah, Montgomery Lawton. And so he ends up staying on and working there, and then years in the future, Carlotta is now a young woman, and this charming Eduardo Lizalde shows up. He is the son of the man who is funding Moreau's experiments, and that kind of sets off a series of events that will, you know, change their lives forever. I'm laughing because that's like a very generic way to finish a synopsis, but I couldn't really think of anything better. Yeah, I loved this. I do understand why people don't like the slow build-up at the beginning. It takes a while before we get to some of the big events, but I actually really liked that. Again, I love this author's writing. I was very compelled by these characters. I like the way she talks about these themes of colonization, and race and colorism and identity and gender. Like, I love the way that Sylvia Garcia incorporates her themes into her stories, and I was so compelled by that and the characters and the writing that I did not care that it took a while for the main plot to pick up, but that is something to keep in mind if you like really fast-paced books. I also loved Carlotta from the beginning, but I was shocked at how won over I was by Montgomery. Like, the first few times we see him or follow his perspective, I was not a fan. Like, I had very mixed feelings about him, but I ended up being very invested in him as well, and really I found him such an interesting character to follow, and I really liked some of the side characters as well. I really liked seeing Carlotta learn more about her father, about herself, about like what these experiments are, what's going on. I liked the historical connections and the way that Sylvia Garcia used those to talk about these themes. And I also feel like the ending was super interesting. I feel like it was a pretty good balance of like tying up some things, but then also leaving some things open for the future. It was very interesting. So once again, I see why this is not everyone's thing, but I loved this, and I gave The Daughter of Dr Moreau 5 stars. Next, I finished Akata Witch by Nydia Okorafor. This is the first book in the Nsubidi Chronicles series, and we are following a young girl named Sunny, who is albino, and this book is set in Nigeria. I think she was born in the US, and she lived there for a while, but now she has come to Nigeria, where her family is from, and at the beginning of the book she is just trying to get through the day without getting bullied at school for being albino, and then she ends up finding out that she has magical abilities. So her and a few of her friends who already are part of this magical world, they kind of end up forming their own magical group, and they end up like training. They find out they have an important part to play in stopping this person who is kidnapping and killing children in their city. And I overall really liked this. I liked the setting. Like, I found it so interesting to read a book that is set in Nigeria and that talks about topics from a very different perspective than in the US or like the Western context. Like, this book does deal with colorism and race, but again, in a very different context, and I thought that was really interesting and really important to see that. Like, we see the way that Sunny and other characters are treated differently based on how dark their skin tone is. Like, in Sunny's case, she's albino. We also see like the different view of somebody who characters will view as African versus African American, and the way that that kind of plays into it. So I thought that was really interesting. I also really love that the abilities that these characters have are directly connected to things that are unique about them, and that that other people in society would view as a negative thing. Like, Sunny's power is connected to being albino, and I really like that. I really like that message and that symbolism. I also personally like when we have a book that has contemporary and fantasy elements. I like when it deals with real world issues in a way that has like a fantasy version, but it doesn't like replace the real world issue with that. You know what I mean? Like, Sunny is kind of treated as like a second-class magic practitioner because she's a free agent, which means that she basically doesn't, I think it's something to do with like inheriting your magic, and she doesn't. So she's kind of treated as being like lesser, and the book talks about that and uses it as an interesting parallel for real world issues, you know, having to do with race or birth, or ethnicity, but it doesn't do that thing that sometimes books like fantasy does, where it's like, oh, the real racism is magic, you know? I also really liked that the currency in this world is knowledge. I thought that was a very cool touch. And there were just like little things like that I found really interesting. Like the little like wasp character on the front, like I thought they were a really interesting addition as well, so I liked details like that. I also really liked the characters. I enjoyed Sunny and her friend group, and getting to see them work together and become better friends. I thought the magic aspects were interesting. I always enjoy Nydia Okorafor's writing. I'm glad to finally be reading more from her. She's another writer where her writing is just very like smooth, and like I think she's very good at creating characters and like responses and emotions in just a few words, which I find impressive. I was also surprised at how intense some parts of this got, like the murderer that they're chasing, and also the fact, like I thought this was very interesting, that our group of main characters are told over and over by adults that like, yes, they have an important part to play, but they might not survive playing it, you know? Like, I just thought that was very interesting. They were like, we don't want anything to happen to you, but if something does, we're gonna have to get somebody else to do this because this is bigger than us, which I just thought was a very interesting perspective on that. So overall, I really liked this, and I gave Akata Witch 4 stars. And finally, the last book I'm going to talk about today is The Midnight Orchestra by Jessica Corey. This is a sequel to the Mystic School of Musicraft. So in this world, music is magical. It is used for spell casting, and our main character Amelia is at a magic school. And after the events of the first book, she's kind of settling in, but then of course some other things end up going wrong. There's a new person at school who is kind of coming between her and one of her friends. She also gets this invitation to something called the Midnight Orchestra, which she doesn't really understand, and the more she learns about it, the more creeped out she gets. She doesn't really know what to do, and she also is, like, everybody's kind of counting on her to play an important role in this competition they have coming up, so she's really stressed about that. She's not sure what to do, so there's a lot going on. I feel like I didn't do a great job summarizing that, but I liked this, but I was disappointed in it compared to the first book. I'll start with the things that I did like. I continue to enjoy the friendships in this book. I really love the music as magic thing. I liked some of the new characters, like Miss Mott was really fun, even though she was kind of over the top. And I think some of the creepiness of this book was done really well. But I had some issues with it as well. So for one thing, the ending, I had very mixed feelings about. Like I said on Goodreads, it was kind of a roller coaster because I really liked Amelia's like final confrontation scene, even though there was like a lot of build up to that, like that was a long time coming. And I liked some of the emotional resolution, but I didn't like some of the loose threads left at the end. I also really didn't like the way the Composium competition was handled ultimately. And then also, like, one of my other really big problems with this is it felt kind of repetitive compared to the first book, and specifically in a plot line that I didn't like, that I don't tend to like. Like, getting 2 books in a row where Amelia, it has like 2 people basically that like her and everybody else hates her for something that she's like, that isn't really her fault. Like, that's pretty frustrating. Like, doing that twice in a row I think is a little much. Like, I just didn't really like the main conflict of this book. So I do plan to continue this series. I just didn't enjoy this one as much as the first book, and I gave The Midnight Orchestra 3.75 stars. Okay, everybody, so that was the first part of my August wrap-up. Please comment down below and let me know if you have read any of these books, what you thought of them, or if you're going to pick them up. And again, I hope you guys are, you know, making it through the awful weather going on in a lot of parts of the world. I hope you're taking care of yourselves. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!